Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, a crazy Karen moved into my neighborhood and continuously trespassed on my private farm property. At one point, she went way too far and tried to kill me. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So I own a big piece of land with my farm, chicken coop, a small barn and my house. It's too big for just me, but my parents and brother help me out sometimes. The neighborhood has been quiet for most of the time, people usually minding their business until this Karen moved in last year. I live in East Asia, but Karen does not seem to be from around here. She looks different, not like the people here, but not exactly like what you would expect from someone American. I cannot figure out her accent either, so I don't know where she's from. From the very beginning though, it was clear that Karen was gonna be a problem for us. One day, while chatting with a friend, we noticed her having a heated argument with one of the workers who was helping move her things. Something seemed to be missing and she was blaming the worker, but her accent was so strong that it seemed like the worker could not quite understand her. My friend and I thought about stepping in, but before we could, we saw a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, timidly approach Karen holding up a bag. Karen snatched the bag from the girl and then started yelling at her. Then she grabbed the girl's wrist and forcefully dragged her inside, leaving the confused worker behind. My friend and I were really worried about the whole scene, it just did not seem right. I did not run into Karen for almost a whole month. Whenever I went out to deliver eggs or do my chores, I would see her up to something, usually arguing with someone or scolding the little girl. The auntie who helped with the eggs told me that the girl was Karen's daughter. I had a feeling, but it was still troubling to see how Karen treated her. Now, I know some parents scold their children, it happens. In many Asian families, strict scolding or even punishment is how they discipline kids. I don't really agree with it, but this is reality. However, the weird part was, this little girl did not seem like she was misbehaving or being stubborn enough to deserve all those scoldings. I shared my thoughts with the auntie and she sighed, looking sad. She said they had not even heard the girl speak once. Despite that, Karen would still scold her for who knows what reasons. Almost a month later, I came home a bit earlier than usual and noticed that the main gate was ajar. I was not too worried because break-ins were not common in our area, but I still moved cautiously, trying not to make much noise. As I looked around my property, everything seemed in order and the door to my house was securely shut. I then went towards the back of the property, where I heard some chattering. That's when I saw Karen wandering around my farm with the little girl trailing behind her. I called out to her and both of them flinched. It made me feel bad when I saw the little girl almost tearing up, but Karen did not even acknowledge her. Instead, she looked me up and down with a frown as if I was the one inconveniencing her. I asked what they were doing here, and Karen, with that heavy accent of hers, said something about exploring and claimed that she thought it was a public area. I explained that it was private property and she needed permission to be here. Instead of apologizing, she just huffed and muttered something about me being too uptight. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. About a week later, I came back home to find the gate ajar again and noises were coming from the back. This time, not only did I find Karen and the little girl, but there was also a little boy with them. He seemed younger than the girl, not by much, and he was running around my farm screaming and kicking anything in his path. I shouted at them, asking what they were doing on my property without permission again. Karen had the nerve to roll her eyes and said her son wanted to see how a dirty farm looks, so she brought them here. I told her this is not a museum where they can just waltz in for sightseeing. As I spoke, I saw the boy heading towards my coop. I ran after him to stop him, standing right in front. That's when Karen came running, screaming at me and accusing me of hurting her son. I told her to get out and she huffed before taking her son away. The little girl followed slowly, but before leaving, she turned to me and softly said, "Sorry," before running away. The next day, I found out that Karen's parents had dropped by and the boy came with them. He was apparently Karen's son, although nobody knew why he arrived later with his grandparents. I decided not to get involved in their family mess. I did, however, warn the neighbors about how Karen kept trespassing on my property, urging them to be cautious of her tendency to break in. If I were in a city, I might have reported this right away, but in our quiet area, we rarely involve the police in petty matters like this. The following week, like clockwork, I came home to find my gate open again. This time, though, there was a new but familiar smell. I approached their back with a bucket of water and found Karen using my grill, her children standing behind her. The girl noticed me, but she stayed silent as I threw the bucket of water on Karen. The little boy screamed and jumped back from his mom, running behind his sister to hide. Karen cursed at me and tried to hit me, but she was both too foolish and too clumsy, so she ended up falling on her face. I turned to look at the girl, who seemed to be smiling slightly, and motioned for her to go outside. She took her brother's hand and they ran out as Karen got up and tried to throw stones in my direction, missing by a mile. She walked out as well, threatening that she would put me in my place. I knew she would be back the next week. I don't know if she knew how to pick a lock, but she had enough experience breaking in that I found my gate ajar even after changing the lock. This time, as I made my way to the back, I saw the girl standing near the edge of the house. She saw me, but she didn't turn around. Instead, she placed her hand on her back and curled her ring and small finger, her pointer and middle finger touching. A gun. She made a gun with her hand. I understood what she meant and immediately backed off before calling the police. I did not leave my property, not because I was afraid of Karen running away, but because I was scared of what a person like her could do with a weapon, especially with children around her. The police would take about 15 minutes to arrive, so I decided to sneak into my house and retrieve my pistol. It took me some time. As I was getting out my house with the pistol, Karen came around looking for someone and then spotted me. She smiled in an almost manic way and fired in my direction. I ducked as fast as I could, even though the bullet was a good distance away from my torso. This was not good news because it meant Karen was using a weapon she did not even know how to operate. I could see the sister trying to yank her brother away from Karen, who was holding his wrist tightly. Both siblings were crying, but Karen didn't care. I couldn't find it in myself to shoot, not when the children were near her. So I grabbed a bag of loose chalk that my brother had brought a few days ago and threw it in her direction. It gave me enough time to lock myself in my house, and thankfully I heard the police jeep pulling up. I could hear Karen screaming as she shot 2 more times, and I prayed that the kids were okay. Eventually, I heard the shouts of the police, and I only came out when the officer knocked on my door. The children cried as Karen was forcefully dragged away, still screaming and cursing. A crowd had gathered after the commotion, and I signaled the auntie to take care of the siblings as I spoke to the police. They asked if I wanted to press charges, and I agreed, though I was concerned about what would happen to the children. The officer explained that they would check Karen's contacts and the kids would be taken away accordingly. It did not sit well with me, but I had no say in the matter. After the investigation was completed, Karen was not only jailed for what she did, but also for illegally acquiring a weapon. The children were taken back by their grandparents. I hope they were not as psychotic as Karen, but I never received an update on them. And yeah, ripe stars, let's hope that Karen won't roam the streets anytime soon again. Definitely a threat to public safety. Either way, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and now let's continue. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. My neighbor is the biggest douchebag I've ever had the displeasure of coming across in my lifetime. I've no idea if he feels threatened by me having a good-looking wife, 2 kids, and a bigger and nicer home. He really does seem like the type to need to prove his manliness by having bigger and better things than other guys. Too bad that he has the personality of an evil Disney villain that nobody wants to go near. Stepping away from him for a minute, I want to talk about my kids' favorite time of the year. That would be the winter, when it snows and they get to go out and play in the snow. Now, I'm more of a summer guy myself, but the kids go crazy when it snows, so I put on a ton of layers and go outside with them to play. The first big snow of the year is kind of sacred in our house, and there are just some things we always do. Make a snowman where every one of us needs to help, according to my oldest, which is 8 years old. Also, hot chocolate must be served with dinner after a long day of playing, according to my 4-year-old. And also sledding down the big hill in our front yard, according to my 7-year-old. Breaking these rules cannot happen, of course, so we started as normal. The snowman came out fantastic, but by the end of it I was freezing, and I had no idea why my kids were not. Since I'm too big for their sleds anyway, I decided to go inside and volunteer to get everybody a snack. They go to the top of the hill and start sledding down it over and over again. It's really nice to have that hill in the winter because it starts in our side yard and ends in the backyard, meaning the street is not any kind of dangerous factor. I am gone maybe 10 minutes maximum, but when I come out, I hear my neighbor screaming at my 3 boys. Keep in mind again, the youngest is 4 and sobbing at this adult man hovering over him and screaming, "Me, get away from them!" I run over and get between my kids and this jerk who thinks he can come onto my property and yell at my kids. Me, what do you think you're doing yelling at my boys? Neighbor, they are being noisy and sliding down onto my property. And then this one, points to my oldest, decided that he could just talk back to me. I'm an adult. Some people teach their children that adults are always right and they have to listen to them no matter what. I personally don't employ this way of parenting and instead tell my kids that they always have a voice. That there is a way to use it without being rude, but they are allowed to stand up for themselves. I know this is what my oldest son did when he saw this guy picking on him and his brothers. So I asked him directly what happened. Oldest son, we were sledding down the hill and he came and told us it was his lawn. I told him that we didn't go past the fence and that you said the fence is where our yard ends, that the other side belongs to somebody else so we cannot go there. I told him that, and then he started yelling louder that I shouldn't talk back to him. Me, you are 100% right. His lawn is on the other side of the fence. You were playing in the right place. You did a good job, but now dad is gonna take over, okay? Oldest son, okay dad. I sent them inside to eat the cookies I left on the porch when I heard the commotion, so they didn't have to hear my colorful language. I laid into my neighbor about never yelling or even talking to my children again, or else it would not be pretty. Neighbor pulled out his phone and actually called the police, claiming my kids were playing on his land and trespassing. He literally called the police with this total lie that he expected to get away with. I did not engage with him and decided that when the police came, I would let them handle everything. They got there and right away, neighbor was talking about the kids playing loudly in the snow and they must be breaking some noise pollution laws. Then says that they were on his property and wants the kids to get into trouble for trespassing. Also makes remarks that I am not a fit parent because I allow the kids to talk back to adults. I point out exactly where the property lines are and where my kids were playing. The police were actually confused and asked the neighbor if he realized he was the one currently trespassing. Also, if he really expected them to arrest 3 children for playing loudly in the middle of the day. The more they talked to him, the redder and more embarrassed he seemed to get. They left it off with telling him that he should stay on his side of the property because otherwise he will be a repeat trespasser and I can press charges on him. Also, they warned him that yelling at children could not happen and he had to stay away from them. They left, and for everybody about to click away because of that ending, wait, because it does not end there. So I decided that he needs a little bit more punishment and had the perfect idea on how to do it. I told my oldest boys to invite all of their friends over to have a massive snow day in our yard. My youngest only has me and my wife as friends, so he didn't get to invite anybody. My boys are pretty popular, and before I knew it, there were more kids than I could count and a good number of parents to help in both my front and backyard. Many snowmen were built, and before long 2 forts for a snowball fight were built. My oldest sons and their respective friends also all wanted my youngest to be on their team, so he also had a great time. Neighbor now had to deal with the noise of 10 times as many kids, as well as snowballs flying across the air and landing onto his property. Unable to do anything about it because of everything the police told him just an hour before. The parents loved all the kids getting to play together and enjoying the snow. I made sure to tell them that their kids were invited any snow days in the future, since our yard seems to be perfect for them. I did let a few of them in on why I suddenly had my boys invite all the kids, and they loved my revenge plan. The day ended with about 30 cups of hot chocolate being handed out and a bunch of exhausted kids who seemed to have the best snow day of their lives. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoy these petty revenge stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would really help me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is a revenge story. So my husband and I got married a year and a half ago, and when we got married I noticed from that point I've gained roughly 15-ish pounds. Nothing crazy, adding some hardly noticeable pudge around my tummy area. I didn't think too much of it. Now, I would jokingly, and he knows I'm joking, say that I'm gaining weight because I married him. I know that's not the case. The true culprit is a mix of cooking lots of yummy foods together, since we love cooking and trying new foods, and me switching to a new birth control method. Anyway, 6 months in, I'm changing into a tank top and some old short to go do some gardening, and these shorts, which used to fit me like a glove, now barely zipper up and leave me with a tiny muffin top. Naturally, I pout at the realization, turn to my husband and show him. He gets a deer in the headlights look as he realizes my dilemma, as his brain struggles to think of the least offensive response. Husband, maybe you should work out or something? We both had a good chuckle at that, and it did motivate me to put some more effort in. I have not dropped the weight, but I haven't gained any more, and I'm good with my body image. But last night came my revenge. Hubby comes out of our walk-in closet with an armload of pants and throws them on the bed. Husband, they don't fit. Me, how? Are they too short? Husband, they are too tight around the waist. I held on to them to see if they would fit again, but they still don't, so me, a grin breaks across my face as I look up at him from my computer. Maybe you should work out. He looked at me for a second and then he remembered, tried not to smile and muttered a snickering, "Oh my god," as he rolled his eyes and left me to deal with the pants. I made sure to give him half my cheesecake slice later. And the next one is another revenge story. I'm a professional driver, and as such, on the roads in the US there are different truck stops throughout the country that have a pay-to-park system. Usually about 10 to 20% of the lot marked off as reserved, with each space running from $15 to $25. And damn, parking in the US is not cheap. Anyway, the truck stop where this took place had parking for $17, which is relatively cheap for a guaranteed spot. The spots are reserved for 24 hours starting at 4 p.m. local time and extending to 3 p.m. the following afternoon. I knew that I would have a late night delivery, so I came to the truck stop around 3:30 and paid for a reserved spot. I told the manager on duty that I had a delivery up the road that night and would be back and once delivery was completed, but should still be able to clear out the spot by the next afternoon today. She told me that this was okay and she would mark the spot as sold when I left, and that way, if someone else comes in trying to reserve that spot, she would consult her notes and then deny the sale. 11:15 p.m. rolls around, I take off for my delivery. I don't get out of that facility until 2:30 a.m. the next morning, so I groggily drive back to the truck stop to reclaim my paid-for spot. Only to find that the reserved parking spaces are all full. I then call the manager on duty, and after giving her my info, I inform her that all the spots are full and that someone has parked in a spot and has not paid for it. She sends her other employee out to start checking trucks. The culprit was from a company that is known for their bright orange trailers, and he was a company driver. The other employee starts banging on his door to inform him that he is parked illegally and he has to move. Meanwhile, I can see the commotion from my mirror with my vantage point in the fuel island where I had been instructed to temporarily park. The driver answers the door with a bottle of Heineken in one hand and some sort of smoking implement in another. I know what it is, but for the sake of the mods I'm not gonna say it. So I decided to roll down the window to hear the commotion, and I hear the employee tell the driver to either move or he will get the towing company and police involved. This driver is flat out irate that someone had the audacity to tell him where he can and cannot park, so he slams the door on the employee, threatening him. Employee calls the police and tow company, and the police show up first. I had worked for this company before, so I know their policies and, more importantly, what they can and cannot have in their trucks. Alcoholic beverages are not allowed in the cab. Anything that's not a cigarette or a cigar and a lighter also not allowed. The coup de grace, a pew-pew of any kind, absolutely not allowed, and especially not allowed loaded. This driver had all that and some other not so legal substances in his cab, so he was hauled away in handcuffs. His truck was hauled away on a wrecker. I made a call after the commotion died down to the company's safety director and informed them that their rig will be in an impound lot and their driver is going to jail over the not so legal stuff he had in his truck. She thanked me and said that he will definitely lose his job, especially over the alcohol and the other not so legal stuff. I guess he played the screw around and find out card and it bit him in his career. And the next one is another revenge story. OP has a real estate business, often buys land or an old house and then improves and sells it. Occasionally, she leases a place, improves and then subleases it. And by the way, Ripe Stars, if you're confused about this, OP is basically telling this story from the perspective of someone else because it is not her own story. She's essentially talking about someone else getting revenge. Either way, this person found an old shabby house but at a great location online, so she contacted the agent and offered to buy it, but the agent said the owner only wants to lease it. They agree to make a lease contract that has to be renewed every 3 years and negotiate a date to sign it. However, OP has to go abroad for some time before they'll be able to meet and sign a contract, so the agent asks for a deposit for about $1,800. OP agrees, and one day after the deposit is transferred, the agent deletes all her posts on the website, blocks OP's number, and leaves the chat in line, which is similar to WhatsApp. OP collects all the chat logs and transfers the paper and then goes to the police. They said they cannot do anything since it is a civil case, despite OP's protest that this is fraud, hence a criminal case. Without the police's paper, OP cannot go to the bank and has that agent's account suspended. Instead, she consults a law firm, which also has a private investigation service. For about $75, the investigator gives OP the agent's real phone number, legal address, her license plate, the company name and address which she works for, list of her relatives and their phone number, and also their address. And the lawyer at the firm writes a letter that states OP is gonna sue her for criminal case and send it to her legal address. OP then spends another $150 to hire an investigator to find out where she actually lives and keeps an eye on her for information such as who she lives with and her daily routine. After finding out that she only lives on her own, OP goes to her house to confront her and ask for the money back. She said she doesn't have it now and will transfer it back later. OP then proceeds to tell her that in case that she, OP, wants her agent to contact her agent's boss to guarantee that OP will get her money back. She refuses to let anyone at the company know about this. Instead, she transfers $900 back to OP via mobile phone at that moment and said she will transfer the rest at the end of the month. OP said that that is unacceptable and that she will contact her parents and then show the info she has on her. The agent was beyond shock and tells OP that her parents had mentioned a letter from the law firm, but they didn't open it. The agent then begins to weep and cry and beg for her mercy and promise for her money at the end of the month. OP agrees and then said she changes her number and asks for her agent's phone so OP could save her, OP's number, into her agent's phone. When the agent hands OP the phone, it was an iPhone, OP says she will keep it and only give it back when she gets the money at the end of the month. Also, the remaining balance is not $900 but $1,125, for she had to hire a private investigator to get to her. However, she gives her back her SIM card. OP says if she goes to the police about the phone or she does not receive the money, she will contact her company and her parents and then take her to criminal court. At the end of the month, OP receives the money, but she contacts her company anyway to make sure that she couldn't find a job in real estate anymore. The agent calls OP and berates her for her dishonesty, as she did everything she was told to do, but OP still contacted the company. OP said to her that honesty is not for a thief. By the way, about the contact parents part, in my country, we care a lot about how our parents think of us. And yes, I'm Asian. And by the way, guys, I gotta say, this story sounds a lot like it happened in Thailand. Especially when OP talked about getting money transferred via a cell phone. That sounds a lot like Thailand because actually when it comes to payments and banks and everything, Thailand is extremely modern. It doesn't matter what you pay for, even if you buy a coffee for a few cents or something, you can send that person the money via an iPhone app, or Android app, I guess. The money ends up on the account of the other person in seconds and it is extremely convenient. However, then again, I guess other Asian countries have similar systems, especially India, so I'm not exactly sure where OP is really from. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.